The missing sense of place. Cities become bad places to live in when they lose what planners call a sense of place. This term means that a street, square, or plaza feels like a distinct location with clear boundaries, visual identity, and human-centered proportions. In well-designed spaces, buildings, trees, or arcades form the edges of the public room, while canopies, awnings, or even a continuous tree line create a ceiling. Details at eye level, such as shop windows, balconies, signs, or public art, complete the sense of enclosure, making the area feel memorable and worth spending time in. When these elements are absent, the excuse is usually that space must be left open for cars and parking. But wide roads and large asphalt surfaces erase boundaries and scale, leaving nothing to distinguish one location from another. Instead of being in a defined place, people feel like they are in a leftover area between traffic lanes. This is the foundation of most excuses for bad urban design, prioritizing vehicles over the spatial qualities that make an area feel human and unique. Wider roads. One of the most common justifications for poor urban design is the claim that streets must be wide to handle traffic. In practice, this destroys the enclosure, which is the proportion between street width and height of building. A useful rule of thumb in planning is that a street should not exceed a 3-to-1 ratio of width to height, and a public square should not exceed 6-to-1. When streets or squares grow beyond these proportions, they begin to feel exposed and empty rather than defined and comfortable. In car-dependent suburbs, streets are routinely built far wider than this ratio to accommodate multiple lanes, turning radii, and free-flowing traffic. The result is that sidewalks feel insignificant and the pedestrian experience collapses into insignificance. Compare this to historic squares or narrow streets in European cities, where proportions are tighter and spaces feel like outdoor rooms. The wider the road becomes, the less the sense of place disappears and the less likely people are to walk, gather, or linger.
Open space means quality space. Another frequent argument in urban design is that large open areas automatically create better public spaces. In reality, openness without boundaries erases enclosure and makes areas feel empty, exposed, and forgettable. A plaza or square is only successful if it has defined edges and a sense of proportion. Without those elements, the space lacks identity and becomes difficult for people to use comfortably. Examples show the contrast clearly. St. Peter's Square in the Vatican works as a vast open space only because it includes a central obelisk, curved colonnades, and a clear ceremonial purpose. By contrast, a suburban parking lot is also an open space, but because it lacks edges, hierarchy, and human-scale detail, it reads as nothing more than leftover land for cars. This is why many suburban centers feel lifeless. Their open areas are designed for vehicle storage rather than human activity. Cars must be prioritized for access. Many failing urban spaces are justified with the claim that car access is essential. This assumption reshapes streets and squares around vehicle movement rather than human presence. When design choices prioritize driving lanes, turning space, and surface parking, the result is an environment where every location looks the same. Strip malls, power centers, and arterial roads across North America all repeat this pattern. Wide asphalt surfaces with little distinction, no enclosure, and minimal pedestrian value. By contrast, streets that limit vehicle priority and allocate space to walking, cycling, and public transit create places that feel specific and meaningful. In Amsterdam, even very wide rights-of-way are broken down with tree lines, medians, and narrow car lanes, producing multiple human-scale rooms within the larger space. Where cars dominate, every block is interchangeable. Where people are prioritized, each block develops its own identity.
Blank walls are efficient. Developers often argue that plain facades, uninterrupted walls, or uniform siding are cheaper and more efficient. In practice, this strips streets of what planners call eye-level interest. Eye-level interest refers to the details and activities visible to pedestrians as they move through a place. Shop fronts, windows, cafes, stalls, and public art all provide visual engagement that make people want to linger. When facades are blank, with no doors, windows, or detail, the street begins to feel hostile and monotonous. Walking past a continuous stretch of parking lot wall or cheap siding feels like walking beside the edge of a warehouse. By contrast, older districts in cities like Paris or Prague are filled with mosaic work, carved stone, balconies, and signage that transform simple walls into part of the public experience. Streets without these details resemble corridors of neglect rather than public rooms, and this lack of interest is one of the defining characteristics of bad cities. Entrances don't matter. A common mistake in modern urban planning is spacing entrances too far apart, often justified by the idea that large stores or complexes only need a single main access. In reality, entrance frequency is critical for creating active and walkable places. When there are multiple doors, storefronts, or passages along a street, people have many reasons to stop, enter, and interact. This pattern generates foot traffic and makes the street itself an attractive destination. In suburban power centers, entrances are so widely separated that people rarely walk between them. Instead, they return to their cars and drive from one store to the next. This design discourages walking entirely and turns the public realm into little more than a network of parking lots. By contrast, traditional plazas, such as Dolac Square in Zagreb, provide numerous points of entry connected to nearby streets and public transit. Frequent entrances allow the square to function as part of the surrounding city, rather than as an isolated pocket of space. Where entrances are sparse, places become empty and inaccessible, no matter how much open space they contain.
A plaza works anywhere. Urban designers sometimes assume that a single, large public square can serve as the centerpiece of a community. However, when plazas are isolated from streets and surrounded by parking, they lose the qualities that make them successful. A plaza must be connected to the city around it through multiple entrances, nearby shops, and access to transit. Without these links, it becomes an empty space that people must drive to rather than a place that is naturally integrated into daily life. Historic squares in Europe illustrate why this connectivity matters. Dolac Square in Zagreb, with its umbrellas and surrounding markets, is fully enclosed but remains accessible from many directions. By contrast, suburban shopping malls place plazas in the middle of parking lots, where they can only be reached by car. In this setup, the space cannot generate activity or identity. A plaza on its own does not guarantee success. It only works when it is part of a connected urban fabric. Chain stores provide identity. Developers and city officials often claim that bringing in well-known chain stores strengthens a city's economy and identity. In practice, the opposite occurs. Chain dominance erases the distinctiveness of a place. When every street corner hosts the same global brands, the result is a generic environment that looks identical across different cities and countries. This undermines the uniqueness that gives a city meaning. Paris offers a clear example. Its historic streets and architecture are globally recognized, yet the Champs-Élysées has increasingly filled with international chains, making the avenue feel less like a Parisian landmark and more like a standard shopping mall. In response, cities such as Amsterdam have begun regulating which types of businesses can open in their historic centers, ensuring that local shops, cafes, and cultural institutions maintain the city's character. Without such measures, urban areas risk becoming interchangeable commercial corridors rather than memorable places.